Hello guys, it is 420 somewhere. Today we're going to talk about gateway drugs and the problem that New York City is dealing with when it comes to illicit markets. Alright, so we've all heard the classic story of marijuana being the first step towards a dark, sinister path into drug use and homelessness and junkie lifestyles and all of that stuff, because it is the one drug that everyone takes first, and then it expands their horizons. They think, oh my gosh, I just took a psychoactive thing. I want to take more psychoactive things, and I want this feeling to expand and get bigger and bigger. And so that's kind of the logic behind it being a gateway drug, which we've heard for decades now. That makes sense. There's a part of that definitely makes sense. However, the question really is there any truth in the pudding? Is there any actual basis for this when it comes to statistics? And there was a study that came out recently that shows that maybe not, maybe there isn't much of a basis to this. A study analyzed over 12,000 people around the ages of 21 to 26. And in this study, they checked whether or not there was any cross-sectional analyses. I'm using terms that I don't quite know here. Cross-sectional information on frequency of marijuana smoking, along with alcohol use, along with nicotine use, and along with pain reliever, like heavy pain relief pills use. And they found that there really isn't actually much, and if anything, the more you smoke marijuana, the less you're doing the alcohol, the less you're using alcohol, the less you're using nicotine, and the less you're using these pain relievers, which is basically the reverse of a gateway drug. The fact that you use more marijuana, you're using less of this other stuff. However, they did find a correlation with e-cigarettes, and that kind of makes sense to an extent because smoking is similar, but everything else, it's kind of gotten the opposite way. So as marijuana goes up, the rest go down. And that makes sense to me. Marijuana has, because it's been put in this kind of semi-legal category for so long, and it's really kind of separated itself, compartmentalized itself from everything else in the market, especially things that are illicit still. So marijuana has really, if anything, maybe it has kind of stepped outside of that gateway logic and into something that's more of like you're a marijuana smoker and that's that, or you don't really touch anything else. This is your drug of choice, because there's not much else out there like it. Everything else is kind of an upper or a downer, and marijuana is very specific. So that's good news. You can always point to this study, which I'll link in the description. You can always point to this study if people still talk about the gateway phenomenon. You can say, well, actually, it's kind of a reverse gateway drug. Second story is an interesting one because it's New York City, where they have been dealing with this problem, or I guess it's at this point it's not even really a problem. It seems like it's going to be a problem at some point, with a bunch of trucks popping up that are selling marijuana illicitly, but out in the open, just everywhere. They're seriously everywhere. They pop up more and more because there's no punishment for what they're doing, and they can just continually sell marijuana by either doing donation-based, by doing a membership fee, or by buying a t-shirt and you get marijuana with it. All of these things that are making it possible for them to sell weed out in the open in New York City and across the state as well, across New York State, because they legalized and the market has not been put into place, and probably will be the end of this year and especially in the beginning of next year. But for now, we're in this gray area where a bunch of businesses are opening up and doing really well in New York City. I passed one last time I went to New York City. I passed one recently, and they're just hanging out. And the question has always been, what will happen with them? Is there going to be any kind of punishment for them? Are the lawmakers doing anything about this? Do they need to do anything about this? All these questions that we don't quite know the answer to. However, we just heard something from the mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, who's basically giving them a go-ahead to keep going. He says specifically, enjoy yourself, light up, but most importantly, spend some money, is what he said at a Cannabis World Congress and Business Expo in Manhattan. If that's not a green light, I don't really know what else could be, because that's very clearly him saying to all of these people, we're not going to do anything. You just keep doing your thing, and we want to eventually get you into the legal market when that opens up. The question is, is he making it harder for that transition to happen? What people are getting used to without having to deal with taxes, without having to deal with all of the red tape of the government, they're dealing with a very easy system. And it's going to be kind of a rude awakening when that's no longer the case, when they have to deal with all the taxes. I mean, I'm in California, I understand the crappy amount of taxes you have to pay here. And these businesses especially are not gonna wanna do that because they've been now over a year been dealing with no taxes and nothing that's getting in the way of them selling their product to just people out in the street. So it'll be really, really interesting to see when this happens. He's apparently trying to set up some social equity funds, like $5 million in social equity funds to help that transition happen for these people. But again, I don't think that they're gonna want to do this, and I think people are getting used to a certain price point, they're getting used to a certain ease, and they're getting used to a lot of things that are going to try to be thrust away from them once the market opens up in the city especially. And it'll be really interesting to see what happens then, because this is, I think, just making it harder for him. And we'll see all those stories at the end of this year. But for now, that's it for today. We'll be back on Friday with some more stories. I'll see you then.